Hi, this is the video for Tuesday, November 10th for 11th grade English. Today's topic is the continued myth of the Wild West. We're still looking at that concept. Today we're using paintings instead of film. All of it is housed in your big Google Doc, and we'll work through that activity together in class. We'll look at the word archetype. That will really guide the work of the big Google Doc today. And we will look at the first chapter of True Grit together. Your stem is here, since whenever, although the cowboy is the archetype of the West. So let's take a look at the slides for today. We're on day 2 of our unit, and we're going to think about painting and characterization in archetype. First, I'm going to define characterization. So in your big Google Doc, there's a little space where I've got vocab written. And you'll see 2 words in today's, the word archetype and the word characterization. Characterization is just the way that characters are developed by artists. Artists includes authors, painters, sculptors, filmmakers, anybody who's crafting a character. Characterization is the way that they create that character. And so in writing, we're going to look at True Grit, the way that Maddie, our main character, is developed, how we learn about her. And we're going to consider who she is, because there are some archetypes in the Western frontier that she doesn't quite fit into. Who lives on the frontier? The images we get are the pioneer, the person who's out there in a covered wagon, forging ahead and trying to settle new lands. And then we have the cowboy, a couple major archetypes. So Maddie is not either one of those. We're already learning the way that the Wild West and its myth is complicated. Other archetypes, I'm going to show you a bunch right now. You've got the cowboy here. The prostitute, another archetype of the West, one of the ways that women showed up on the frontier in the myth of the West. The gunslinger, so kind of like the cowboy, but somebody who's a little more prone to grab a gun. The rancher here, ready to lasso a cow or whatever it might be. I guess a cow. The Indian. And the Indian of the West is often done with these archetypal headdresses, the Plains Indian, or the bows and arrows, the ways that they're characterized in Western myth. A couple more Indian archetypes here. The sheriff, perhaps, or here, the pilgrim, the person who's setting out to missionify, be a missionary for the Indians. So here's some archetypes that we see. I keep using the word archetype. I haven't actually defined it. An archetype is a stereotype of a character. But unlike a stereotype, which is often negative, archetypes can have some positive or universal qualities. So the archetype of a cowboy doesn't necessarily need to mean that that's a bad thing. It's just that there's an image we have in our mind of what a cowboy is. Archetypes, that word arch, suggests there's a range of things that a character will fit into. And we're going to look at that, this whole unit. But today, we're looking at Remington. So Remington is a painter of the late 1800s who captures a lot of images of the West. And for our activity today, I'd like you to go through your big Google Doc links and just understand what archetypes you see here. Who is depicted? What characters show up in these paintings? Next to each link, add your notes. What kind of characters do you see? What archetypes do you find? Archetypes can be anything you make up. It doesn't have to be a specific word I'm giving you. But, for example, maybe you see an archetype of a cowboy. Use adjectives to describe what you see. I'm going to give class 10 to 15 minutes on your own now as you watch the video. Take the time you need to work through that document. So we'll come back together and we'll look at some of the images here. Remington's oil paintings are really famous for their use of color and oil. We have the flight. This is one of the documents you looked at. Here is the man who's escaping, right? A flight, and he's got 2 guns with him. So archetypes that we notice here, the person who's on the horse, archetypally, would be a settler of the West who's ready to use violence whenever necessary. Guns are a really important prop of the West. So you can see him fleeing the Indians. Another archetype you have is the fighting Indian and the fleeing white man, or the fighting white man There's a lot of conflict that takes place on the Western frontier, and that's captured in this image. And then here you have an archetype of a cowboy on a bucking bronco. Right? The motion here, the horse doesn't even have a hoof on the ground. There's a lot of movement, and the cowboy is holding his own. So you see that description of somebody who is really assured, skilled on a horse, confident, self-reliant. Any of these adjectives that describes the cowboy here would be really fitting. So maybe archetypes, you notice the cowboy. I'm going to give you a couple others that show up in the reading as well. The good old boy is the archetype of somebody who's a really good person, kind of rough around the edges, but always can be counted on to do the right thing. And that's going to show up in the Wild West motifs that we've got in this unit. And then the hero. The hero is something you probably already know of from studying other stuff, like in 9th grade. Who is the hero of this particular book kind of remains to be seen. So archetypes that might have shown up for you, and then we think about what is missing, who is not in these images. For me, conspicuously women are missing, and when Indians are there, it's only men. There's no women, Indians. So then you have Maddie. And I'm really interested in that because we have this myth of the Wild West. The main character of our book is a 14-year-old girl, and so she doesn't seem to fit. But we'll find through the book that she very much does fit. And then we looked as a class at the first chapter of the book. So I read that yesterday, and you finished it on your own. Here's a little nugget that we'll look at to guide our reading and reflection. Books tell us how to go about reading them. Whatever a novel tells us first is information about who, what, where, when, how, and why. About why, intent. About what the writer is up to this time. That first page, and sometimes the first paragraph, even the first sentence, can give you everything you need to know to read the novel. And that is very much the case with True Grit. So let's take a look together on this video at that first chapter. All right, so as Foster says, we're just going to look at the first paragraph here together. People do not give it credence that a 14-year-old girl could leave home and go off in the winter time to avenge her father's blood. But it did not seem so strange then, although I will say it did not happen every day. Whoa. Who is talking? First, we learn a 14-year-old girl. And you learn that she's talking about herself as a 14-year-old girl. So the tone here is really formal. I don't walk around saying, a woman named Mrs. Deacon. I would just say I. Our character here, Maddie, she'll say I for the rest of the book, but in this first sentence, you can hear just how matter-of-fact and how formal she is. She sounds really academic. Already, I'm complicating the myth of the Wild West as this place of lawlessness, of a lack of manners and civility, because she is being very civil. So who? 14-year-old girl, and she is our narrator. What is happening here? 14-year-old girl could leave home, okay, and go off in the winter to avenge her father's blood. So avenge means to seek revenge. Her father's blood tells us already that her father has died. And if she's avenging her father's death, then that means her father was killed. So people do not think it's very believable that a 14-year-old girl like me could leave home and go off in the winter to seek revenge for my dad, who was killed. But it did not seem so strange then, although I will say it did not happen every day. So again, you get that formality. And she is setting herself up as somebody who is unique, somebody who is special. She is going to go seek revenge for her father. That's in many ways unique. She's a girl. She's a young girl. And people would not expect that. It's the winter time. It's not a good time to go out avenging anybody. So we've got the when, winter. We've got the who, Maddie. We've got the what, her father was killed. And we even have the why, which is that she is kind of special and she's doing this thing. She's on this mission. I, she says, was just 14 years of age when a coward going by the name of Tom Cheney shot my father down in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and robbed him of his life and his horse and $150 in cash money, plus 2 California gold pieces that he carried in his trouser band. And so we get a couple more details. So we get the where. This is in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And we get more details about the how her father was killed. A coward named Tom Chaney shot her father and robbed him not only of his life, but of some very specific things, $100, $150 in cash money and 2 California gold pieces. So those details are telling me, again, she's like really matter of fact and formal. Her father died, and she's going to include these other details that don't seem as important, but she is a woman of justice. So this is deeply important to her. He stole her father's life, but he also stole her father's money. And the when is not said. I am telling you that this is in the 19th century, so it's the Wild West of the 1800s. There's a little detail that helps here to get the when. It's the 2 California gold pieces. You might remember from history class, people were going out west to try to seek gold in California. And that was in the mid-19th century, so like 1850s. The big thing I use, mnemonic device I use, is the 49ers, the San Francisco football team, are named that because in 1849, a huge rush of people went out to California to try to find gold. And that's where San Francisco gets part of its name, for the 49ers. So this is sometime around then or after that. We've got all the details we need. And now we know what is the most important thing to Maddie Ross. She is going to go avenge her father's death. We have the whole plot of the book already explained to us right now. And then she goes on to say, here is what happened. So what we're learning about this book is it's going to be a tale of how she avenged her father's death. Knowing that, we're going back to our STEM for today. And I'd like you to explore it on your own, although the cowboy is the archetype of the Wild West. Whenever the cowboy is the archetype of the Wild West, and since the cowboy is the archetype of the Wild West. Now what I'm looking for here is for you to reckon with how Maddie is not quite the archetype we're looking for. But I'd also love you to pull in some other things from the first chapter, because she gets into some of the language around horses and cowboys, and how her life is different than the archetype that we've known in our mind about the West. So that's what you're attempting to achieve in your STEM for today. And that's it. Thank you very much.